Is the gaming hardware tech industry dead? Well, to spoil my own show, no, but innovation in it certainly is. How shall I put this? You could very easily weekend at Bernie's the innovation in the gaming tech industry. To be clear, I'm referring to stuff that's made specifically for gaming. Video cards, while they are essential for gaming, they are used in a lot of other stuff that isn't gaming related. Like, Nvidia didn't spend $1 billion to make Pascal just so you could play Crysis 3 in 4K on a 1080. I'm referring to the hardware stuff, that is made for games, to improve them, to make them more playable, to enhance them. So, is the gaming tech industry dead in this aspect? Yes, it's been dead for a long time now. Or better said, the tech industry, the one that doesn't handle building systems, has been a bit oddly smelling and non-moving for the past several years. I sort of noticed this heavily when I received a press release from Logitech where they were marketing, I'm just gonna show you a picture, which was for something called the 2016 Party Collection, which brings back the style of Memphis from the 80s. To clarify something, Logitech rebranded itself about a year ago to be a bit more, well, I wouldn't say hipsterish, but when they send me press releases like this one, yeah, that's as hipsterish as you can get. It's as if the company is in a death spiral and just can't pull out of it. So on the way down, it just throws out new ideas and sees what sticks. And it's a bit of a mystery to me as to why companies aren't innovating in this area, because the amount of people playing games today is huge. It's amazingly huge. It's ginormous. It's supercalifragilisticexpialidocious even. And yet, no actual innovation from the core companies. Where you do get innovation is from places like Kickstarter, because with Kickstarter we got the Oculus Rift, we got the VR revolution before Facebook confiscated it through crowdfunding. We didn't get that because a company decided, hey, we're gonna make something new, something that will bring new avenues of entertainment to people. No, it was some guy in a garage asking people for money to give them the future. Then he was bought out by Facebook and became a sock puppet for Zuckerberg. Instead of innovating, instead of actually doing something new, something interesting, the gaming tech industry seems to be focused more on adding LEDs to everything. They've added LEDs like RGB LEDs to video cards, you know, that you probably don't ever actually see in your system unless you have a really weird obsession for looking into your system constantly. I did that in the past because I didn't have a side panel attached, since I was using it to actually fan the CPU so it wouldn't overheat in the summer when I was doing video encoding. I don't believe that an LED cooler would have helped with that. But now we have LEDs on everything, and while it makes sense to have them on a keyboard because it helps you see the keyboard actually at night, it maybe helps you organize some shortcut keys if they're RGB and lit individually. Some games have really neat effects that let you actually put certain UI elements into the lighting of the keyboard. But why does a mouse need RGB? Like, I use the light from my mouse, it's a laser red thingamajig, to look at the keyboard at night because I can't see it. That's the only thing I use it for. I do believe I've seen RGB LED mousepads. Not sure if this was an April Fool's prank by Razer, but Razer is the kind of company that would do that without actually understanding why that may be a joke. I mean, this is the company that used to sell the Belkin Nostromo. You know, that quarter of a keyboard thing that may have actually been useful in the Belkin version, but Razer sold it at a 50% markup. because it had their logo on it. So instead of actually making something innovative, they rebranded something and made it wildly expensive and impossible to reach for most people. And that's a really major problem with the gaming tech industry. Not only does it not have any innovation left in it, but the things that actually do seem a bit cool cost a gajillion dollars, and when you get right down to it, it's just a keyboard with LEDs on it. That's it. And the thing that actually drives me a bit insane is that people are fine with this. Like last week I reported on something called the Z, which is a gaming mouse that actually brings some goddamn innovation. It has triggers on it. You can tilt it and use that as an input for an axis. Yeah, it has Z-axis turning control. You can pivot it, you can turn it. It has progressive switches. I find this idea, this concept for a mouse to be excellent. Sure, it is expensive. Yeah, it costs about, oh boy, it's $220, but this isn't an LED crammed device. It actually has technology in it that's meant to not only make you aim better in Counter-Strike, but actually play things better. You could play with just this mouse a game that usually requires something like a steering wheel because you have that fine motion range with this one. You could tilt your character in an FPS in a third-person shooter around the corner just by tilting the mouse. You can even use it instead of a joystick, like almost a full-fledged joystick for flight games, because you have twist rudder, you have yaw, you have roll, you have pitch, you have everything just on the mouse. And when I reported on this subject, people were like, well, that's a very bad idea for a mouse. Well, it sucks, it's horrible. At least people like Razer still know how to make gaming mice which are just the same exact mouse we've had since the optical mouse was invented. Oh sure, the sensor got better, but the mice haven't. They may have added more buttons, usually in the wrong goddamn places, and added LED lights and made them smaller for people with hands the size of ants or Donald Trump, but they're basically the same mouse. There is little to no innovation here. Remember when mice sometimes had two scroll wheels? Remember when wheel tilt was a thing? At one time, mice even had force feedback. I actually know of some people that were planning to make a game, they were actually designing a game based on the idea of force feedback in the mouse. Now granted, that wasn't a very good idea because force feedback in a mouse would sort of drive down your precision kind of a lot, but the Z has tactile feedback, so it's not a vibration engine that will just jerk you around. It's more tactile-ish, it's more like a phone. And yet people complain that no, this mouse has no right to exist because all great gaming mice are made by Razer or Logitech and basically have no features, just a really big sensor that can take about a billion snapshots a second and has a maximum resolution of more DPI than you actually will ever use. So maybe the death of innovation in the gaming tech industry isn't the industry's fault, it's the user's fault because they settled. They didn't ask for anything better. Though to be fair, if Henry Ford had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, and that's what you're asking for right now. The other side of the problem is the games industry itself. It doesn't want to push new boundaries. It doesn't want to force people into buying peripherals unless it's a console company and they will force it down your throat until they do finally admit the Kinect was a piece of crap. Back in the old days, and I mean old days, games companies, well, Origin wasn't that afraid of making people get consistently new hardware to play their games. Now people are quite afraid of that because making a new game is expensive and forcing people to get new hardware will not pay off, mostly because hardware tends to be expensive as well, so they want as big of an install base as possible, so we don't get any innovation. The situation is honestly quite horrible, especially for someone like me that wants to get a new joystick, one that has independent throttle controls, you know, a HOTAS thingamajig. The options are honestly quite limited. because they haven't really been producing new joysticks for some time now. There haven't been games to actually drive the demand, with maybe 2 current exceptions. There's Elite Dangerous, which I believe had some sort of branded controller, and Star Citizen, which is actually co-producing with Mad Catz Sci-Tech. It's making its own controller, its own joystick. Unless the deal falls through, because Mad Catz was in a very bad financial place, like horrible financial place. Mostly because they tended to make a lot of gaming peripherals for Guitar Hero and forgot there was more to the gaming industry than Guitar Hero. Take for example Logitech again. They've made joysticks in the past, fairly good ones. They haven't produced a new one in about 10 years and probably won't, because not a lot of people are buying them, although Star Citizen does have about 1 million people playing it, well, playing the alpha of it, and Elite Dangerous has a bajillion people on it, and probably No Man's Sky will also have a kabajillion, gamillion, trebabillion people playing it, mostly because of the hype. I really hope that game doesn't get murdered by the hype like Spore was, though to be fair, Spore was also killed by EA because some idiot at EA decided, hey, let's take this game and make it for kids. But with No Man's Sky, with Elite Dangerous, with Star Citizen, there is kind of a market for new joysticks, but you don't see them. Especially in the low-end sector, like every joystick you see in the low-end sector is manufactured from maybe 2 base variants, like for the base I mean, the one with the suction cups, and 1 or 2 stick models that are both made by the same company in China. Like, I've seen my joystick in another color, rebranded. It's the one that looks sort of like a Logitech 3D flight thingamajig. But it's not Logitech, it's by some 2-bit company called Sirius. Well, the sticker on it is. It's made by a different company which puts stickers on it for anyone that wants to sell it. I've seen the stick itself on other models, I've seen the base on other joysticks. It's a cheap, completely worthless thing, and there's no better version to get at this price point. And it's not like advancements in technology have stopped about 10 years ago. No, they kept moving forward. That's why we have mice now with 3D printed buttons. I'm getting back to mice a bit. Rocat launched about a year ago a mouse that lets you adjust what size the buttons can be and how many of them can be. Like, that may seem like a simple, stupid thing that not many people will actually use, but to me that's a sign of innovation, because again, most gaming peripheral companies put the buttons on the mouse in the wrong order. If you haven't used vertically arranged side buttons on a mouse, you haven't lived. Now back to joysticks. Maybe when Star Citizen gets done, hopefully soon, the single player should be out. Well, they said it would be out at the end of this year, but it may be pushed back because they still have a lot of stuff to do on it. Maybe then we'll see some more motion in this field. Maybe. Like, I've still got hope for this, because for gamepads, there's not much of it left. The Steam controller tried to be something great at first, but they made a bit too many compromises. They added thumbsticks, they added normal buttons, they removed that screen thing. It's still an interesting idea, because it does have those pads that let you control things with a bit more precision than you would with a thumbstick. It emulates a mouse. It lets you play the kind of games that will not work on a gamepad, but there is still one major limiting aspect that will not let gamepads evolve anymore: X input. Remember the direct input days? If you have a gamepad from the direct input days, you know that they could have all sorts of good ideas. Like, I still have a Firestorm dual trigger analog thingamajig from Thrustmaster, I believe, that had 2 buttons on its backside that you would press with your ring fingers. triggers. Now those things were amazing because that's the only gamepad on which I could actually control the camera with my right hand while still being able to actually play, use the buttons to jump, to attack. Otherwise I would have to use my right thumb to actually use those actions. But you're not able to do that with most controllers now because of X input, which is a very strict standard set up by Microsoft specifically for the Xbox. Direct input would have covered, and still does cover, every method of input possible. You could have a gamepad that has, 5 axes or 6 axes of motion instead of just the 3. You could have done a lot more things with direct input, but X input is by default enabled. It's easier to implement. There's more documentation for it, I believe, or it's just easier to implement one standard X input and to hell with direct input. And the thing that bothers me even more about this, not even X input is used to its fullest potential. The first time I got one of those gamepads with force feedback, I was amazed. Like, oh my god, just think about what you could make with this game. Like, you could have a scene where your character is blind and is feeling around the floor using the thumbsticks, one for each hand, and trying to find something, glasses, a flashlight, a weapon, something. You could do so many interesting things with the vibration and the triggers. Yeah, you could do a lot of interesting things with the triggers. You could have very fine actions. And then the first thing I played with it was a Devil May Cry game which made you rev up your sword by using the trigger. And the whole being blind thing, yeah, I believe one game has that and it's still in early access. Like, not even the current technology is exploited by the gaming industry. So yeah, the gaming industry is at fault for not pushing technology and causing innovation to be dead. It's also the fault of the gaming tech industry for not making products that would force other developers to use them. Something so spectacular that people would go, oh my god, we have to put that in a game. Like what happened to VR. And it's also the fault of the people like you and me for settling to buy crappy mice made by Marvo, which barely work after a couple of months, instead of getting something like the Z. Well, no, the Z is a bit too expensive, but the Z4, the cheaper version that's probably gonna come out in a few years if this one is successful. The copycats, the lowering the cost, making things more affordable to people. The bit of the industry that encourages competition. That bit. Where the hell is that bit? It doesn't seem to be around here. Because why should it be? Everyone's charging a premium for the simplest things possible just because they added LEDs to them. Because LEDs are now innovation. Meanwhile, if my keyboard breaks, a very simple keyboard that has a wheel thing for volume, it has a USB pass-through, it even has a microphone and a headphone jack. If I'm ever to replace this one, I'm gonna have to spend about 50 times more on the new keyboard because the low-end models I see on the market now in the same price bracket as this one do not have any of those features. They are just plain horrible keyboards. Because features like this that aren't expensive to implement were moved up as premium features in those LED-ridden mechanical keyboard thingamadoodles. And that's a bit insane. So what's your take on this? Is the gaming hardware tech industry dead or just the innovation in it? And whose fault do you believe it is? Everyone's, like me, or is it the Illuminati? If you enjoyed this show, hit the like button, subscribe, and share it with your friends. Or, if you thought it was horrible, then share it with your enemies and make them suffer. We shall be your weapon of vengeance. But if you liked what you saw, you could, maybe donate, because basically YouTube is horrible at revenue, by using the link in the description, or just buy my book. It's a fantasy book about, well, a lot of stuff. I guarantee it won't suck, and if it does suck, you can find me here and complain about it.